I came home from my dad's funeral. HOA had declared my farm abandoned after 3 days. I've walked into burning buildings. I've pulled bodies from wreckage. I've held dying men in my arms and told them everything would be okay, even when I knew it wouldn't. 25 years as a fire captain teaches you to stay calm when the world is falling apart around you. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for driving up to my father's farm after his funeral and finding a woman in a white blazer telling me I couldn't go home. The sign on the gate said, "Notice of Abandonment," in bright orange letters. Below that, "Property secured by Meadow Creek HOA, auction pending." I sat in my truck for a full 30 seconds, engine still running, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The wooden box on the passenger seat held my father's ashes. I'd driven 14 hours straight from Arizona, where we'd buried what was left of him next to my mother. 4 days. I'd been gone 4 days. A white pickup truck with the HOA logo was parked by the entrance. 2 men in matching polo shirts stood by the gate like discount security guards, and next to them, clipboard in hand, stood a woman who looked like she'd never touched dirt in her entire life. Blonde hair shellacked into place, white suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary, and a smile that made me think of funeral directors. I killed the engine and stepped out. The evening air hit me with that familiar smell, hay, cedar, and Texas dust. The smell of home, the smell of my father. "Mr. Brennan?" The woman extended her hand like we were meeting at a cocktail party. "I'm Patricia Sinclair, president of Meadow Creek Homeowners Association. I'm afraid we have a situation here." I didn't shake her hand. I was holding my father's ashes. "What situation?" My voice came out flat, controlled. The voice I use when I'm one wrong word away from losing my temper. Patricia's smile didn't waver. "This property has been declared abandoned under Section 7 of our Community Safety Code. Any residence showing signs of neglect for 72 hours or more falls under HOA jurisdiction for protective custody. We conducted a safety inspection yesterday and found multiple violations. The property has been secured pending auction." I stared at her, then at the sign, then back at her. "Abandoned," I repeated. "I was gone 4 days. I was at my father's funeral." I lifted the wooden box slightly. "His ashes are right here in my hands." Patricia nodded with practiced sympathy. The kind of sympathy that comes from a training video, not from actual human emotion. "I understand this is a difficult time, Mr. Brennan. Loss is never easy, but rules are rules. The auction is scheduled for next week. You're welcome to bid like everyone else." Something cold settled in my chest. Not grief. I'd already cried myself empty on the drive from Arizona. This was different. This was the calm that comes right before you walk into a fire you know might kill you. "Lady," I said quietly, "this farm has been in my family since 1952. My grandfather bought it with his army savings. My father worked this land for 60 years. And you're telling me you can take it because I wasn't here for 4 days? 3 days is the threshold," she corrected, still smiling. "And technically, the property showed signs of abandonment before that. Overgrown grass, accumulated mail. No vehicle in the driveway. Our safety protocols are very clear. My father died. He didn't abandon anything. He died in his sleep in that house right there." I pointed past the gate to the farmhouse on the hill. The porch light was off. No one had been there to turn it on. Patricia's smile finally cracked, just a little. "Mr. Brennan, I don't make the rules. I just enforce them. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have other matters to attend to." She nodded to the 2 guards. "Make sure Mr. Brennan doesn't enter the premises. The property is under HOA custody now." She turned to walk back to her car. "What's the starting bid?" I called after her. She paused, looked back over her shoulder. $40,000. $40,000 for 180 acres, for land worth at least $600,000 on the open market, for my family's entire history. You just made the worst mistake of your life, I said. Patricia laughed. Soft, dismissive, the kind of laugh you give to a child who doesn't understand how the world works. Mr. Brennan, I've been doing this a long time. You're not the first grieving relative to make threats, and you won't be the last. She got in her car and drove away. The guards stayed at the gate, arms crossed, trying to look intimidating. I stood there in the fading light, holding what was left of my father, staring at the farm I'd known my entire life. The farm where I learned to ride a bike. The farm where Dad taught me to fish. The farm where I'd said goodbye to him 3 weeks ago, not knowing it would be the last time. The guards shifted uncomfortably. They weren't used to men who didn't blink. I'll be back, I told them. And when I am, you'd better be somewhere else. Then I got in my truck, set my father's ashes carefully on the seat beside me, and drove to the nearest motel. Not to sleep, to plan, because Patricia Sinclair didn't know who she was dealing with. She saw a grieving son, vulnerable and emotional. What she didn't see was 25 years of training, 25 years of walking into impossible situations and walking out alive, 25 years of never, ever giving up. My father raised me on this land. He taught me everything I know about hard work, about honor, about standing your ground when the world tries to push you down. And he taught me one more thing. A Brennan doesn't run from fire. A Brennan walks through it. That night, lying in the motel bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling, I kept replaying Patricia's words. The auction is scheduled for next week. You're welcome to bid like everyone else. Bid on my own land. Like a stranger, like someone who didn't have a grandfather's blood in the soil. I turned my head and looked at the wooden box on the nightstand, my father's entire physical existence, reduced to ash and memory. 73 years of life, 60 years on that farm. And some woman in a white suit thought she could erase all of it with a piece of paper. I'm going to fix this, Dad, I whispered into the darkness. I don't know how yet, but I'm going to fix it. The box didn't answer, but I could have sworn I felt something shift in the air, a presence, a warmth. Maybe just the Texas heat leaking through the window, or maybe something more. To understand what that farm meant, you have to understand where it came from. My grandfather, Patrick Brennan, stepped off a transport ship in San Francisco in 1952 with $300 in his pocket and shrapnel scars across his back. Korea had chewed him up and spit him out, like it did to so many young men who thought they knew what war meant until they lived it. He drifted for a while, worked construction in California, drove trucks in Nevada, couldn't sleep more than 2 hours at a time because every loud noise sent him diving for cover. The doctors called it combat fatigue back then. Now we have fancier names for it, but the nightmares are the same. One day, driving through Texas, his truck broke down on a dirt road outside of nowhere. While he waited for help, he walked into a field and just stood there. No buildings, no people, no sounds except wind and birds. For the first time in 2 years, his hands stopped shaking. He bought that land a week later. Every penny he'd saved. The farmer who sold it thought he was crazy. The soil was rocky, the well was shallow, the nearest town was 20 miles away. But Grandpa Patrick didn't care about the soil. He cared about the silence. This is the only place I don't hear the explosions, he told my grandmother when he brought her out to see it. This is the only place I can sleep. He built the farmhouse himself, cut the timber from the woods at the back of the property, laid every stone in the foundation. It took him 3 years, and when he was done, he carved a sign from an oak tree and hung it at the gate. Brennan Farm, store 1952. That sign was still there. I'd seen it when I drove up. They hadn't taken it down yet. My father, Michael Brennan, was born in that house in 1954. He never left, not really. He went to school in town, met my mother at a church dance, married her under the oak tree by the pond. When she died of cancer in 1983, he buried her ashes under that same tree. I was 12 when she passed, old enough to understand death, young enough to think it wouldn't happen to anyone I loved. Dad raised me alone after that, taught me to work the land, to fix engines, to look a man in the eye when you shake his hand. He never remarried, said he'd already found the love of his life and wasn't interested in a replacement. I didn't become a farmer. I know that disappointed him, though he never said so. I went into firefighting instead. Something about running toward danger instead of away from it felt right to me. Maybe I was trying to prove something. Maybe I just needed a different kind of purpose. Dad and I drifted apart for a while. Not angry, just busy. Different lives, different worlds. He was up at dawn, feeding cattle. I was working 48-hour shifts, pulling people out of burning buildings. We'd talk on the phone every few weeks, see each other at Christmas, promise to visit more often. Then, about 10 years ago, something shifted. I got divorced. No kids, thank God, but plenty of bitterness. And suddenly, I had all these empty weekends I didn't know how to fill. I started driving out to the farm on my days off. At first it was awkward. Dad and I had forgotten how to talk to each other about anything except the weather and cattle prices. But slowly, weekend by weekend, we found our way back. We'd fix fences together, the way we did when I was a kid. We'd sit on the porch with beers and watch the sun go down. We'd talk about Mom, about Grandpa, about the war he never discussed and the memories he buried deeper than any well. "This land doesn't belong to us, Tommy," he told me once. We were standing at the edge of the property, looking out over the fields he'd worked his entire life. "We belong to it. We're just the current caretakers. Someday you'll pass it on to someone else, and they'll take care of it after you. That's how it works. The land is patient. The land remembers." I thought I had more time. I thought I'd retire in a few years, move out to the farm full-time, spend Dad's final years learning everything he still had to teach me. I thought we had at least another decade. 3 weeks ago, he called me on a Tuesday night. Nothing unusual. We talked every few days by then, but this time his voice was different. Tired. Worried. "Tommy, some woman came by today. Said she was from the HOA. Wanted me to sign some papers about joining their association. Said there'd be fees, rules, all that suburban nonsense." "What did you tell her?" "Told her to get off my property." This land's been Brennan land since before her parents were born. I'm not signing anything. "Good. Did she leave?" "Eventually. But Tommy, she had this look, like she was measuring the place, like she'd already bought it in her head." He paused. "Something's not right. Can you come out this weekend? Take a look at whatever papers she left." "Sure, Dad. I'll be there Saturday." He died Friday night, in his sleep. Heart attack. The doctor said it was quick, probably painless. He went to bed, and he simply didn't wake up. I never got to say goodbye. I never got to look at those papers. I never got to tell him that I was sorry for all the years I'd wasted, all the weekends I should have spent on that porch, all the conversations we never had. Instead, I spent 4 days burying him next to my mother in Arizona, where her family plot was. 4 days handling paperwork and cremation and all the small cruelties that death inflicts on the living. 4 days thinking that at least the farm would be there when I got back. At least I'd have that. And when I finally drove home, holding everything that remained of my father in a wooden box, a woman in a white suit told me the land forgot us in 72 hours. I spent that first night in the motel going through every document I had. My father's will was simple. Everything went to me, the farm, the equipment, the savings account. the old Ford truck he'd driven since 1987. He'd updated it just last year, had it notarized and filed properly. There was no ambiguity, no legal gray area. Thomas Michael Brennan, sole heir. But Patricia Sinclair didn't care about my father's will. She had paperwork of her own. The next morning, I drove to the county records office. I needed to see exactly what the HOA had filed, what legal basis they thought they had for stealing my family's land. The clerk behind the counter was a woman named Dorothy Chen, 67 years old, worked there for 4 decades, knew every family in the county by name. She'd known my father since he was a young man. "Tom Brennan," she said when I walked in, her face creasing with sympathy. "Oh, honey, I was so sorry to hear about Michael. He was a good man, one of the best." "Thank you, Dorothy. I need your help." "Anything. What do you need?" "Meadow Creek HOA filed something on my father's property. An abandonment claim, maybe an annexation document. I need to see the originals." Dorothy's expression shifted. Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, maybe concern. "Give me a minute." She disappeared into the back room. I waited, studying the water stains on the ceiling, the faded photographs of county commissioners on the walls, the ancient computer humming on the counter. Government offices all smelled the same: old paper, older coffee, and the quiet desperation of bureaucracy. Dorothy came back with a manila folder. She set it on the counter but didn't open it. "Tom," she said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one else was listening. "Something's wrong with these files. I've been here 40 years. I know when documents don't smell right." "Show me." She opened the folder. Inside were 3 documents. The first was a voluntary annexation agreement dated 8 months ago. It stated that Michael Brennan, owner of the property at address, hereby agreed to incorporate his land into the Meadow Creek Homeowners Association service area and abide by all rules, regulations, and fee structures therein. At the bottom was my father's signature, except it wasn't. I know my father's handwriting better than I know my own. I've seen it on birthday cards, on notes he left on the kitchen counter, on the deed he showed me when I was 18 and he explained what it meant to own land. Dad had a distinctive way of writing his name. The B in Brennan always had a small curl at the bottom, a quirk he'd picked up from his own father. The signature on this document had no curl. The B was printed, mechanical, like someone had traced it from a photograph and missed the subtle details. "This is forged," I said. Dorothy nodded slowly. "I thought so too, but there's more." The second document was the notarization of that signature. A notary named Randall Pike had supposedly witnessed my father signing the annexation agreement. His stamp was at the bottom, official and proper. "Dorothy, when did Randall Pike die?" She didn't even need to look it up. 14 months ago, heart attack, same as your father. "And this document is dated 8 months ago." Yes. A dead notary had certified a forged signature. Someone had stolen his stamp, probably from his office after he died, and used it to manufacture legal authority over my father's land. "What's the third document?" I asked. Dorothy hesitated. Then she slid it across the counter. It was an emergency abandonment declaration filed 3 days ago, the day after my father's funeral. It stated that the property had shown signs of neglect, that no owner or representative had been present for 72 hours, and that under HOA bylaws, the property was hereby placed under protective custody pending disposition. The signature at the bottom, Patricia Sinclair. "She filed this herself," I said. "Filed it at 4:47 p.m., Dorothy confirmed. "I wasn't here. Night clerk processed it. He's new, doesn't know the families." I stared at the documents. 3 pieces of paper, all fraudulent, all designed to strip my family of land we'd held for 70 years. And at the center of it all, a woman in a white suit who smiled while she stole. "Dorothy, how many other properties has Meadow Creek HOA filed claims on?" She hesitated again. Then she pulled out another folder, much thicker than the first. 11, she said. "All in the last 3 years. All farms. All declared abandoned under the same Section 7 provision. 11 families, 11 farms. All gone. What happened to them? Auctioned, every single one. A company called Crestwood Auction House handles the sales. Starting bids are always low, $30,000, $40,000. The winning bidder is usually the same entity. Eastfield Holdings, LLC. And who owns Eastfield Holdings?" Dorothy looked at me for a long moment. Then she wrote something on a slip of paper and slid it across the counter. "You didn't get this from me," she whispered. I looked at the paper. 2 words. Patricia Eastfield. Sinclair was her married name. Eastfield was her maiden name. She owned the shell company that was buying up every farm she declared abandoned. How much did Eastfield pay for those 11 farms? Total purchase price at auction, about $400,000. And how much did they sell them for afterward? Dorothy's jaw tightened. Best I can tell from transfer records, just over $4 million. $4 million. Stolen from 11 families through forged documents and fake auctions. And Patricia Sinclair, Patricia Eastfield, had pocketed every cent. I felt sick. Not just angry, physically sick. 11 families. How many of them had elderly parents like my father? How many had been grieving, confused, overwhelmed? How many had looked at the paperwork and the lawyers and the official-looking documents and just given up? That's what they counted on. That's what made the scheme work. Grief is exhausting. Fighting takes energy. Most people, when faced with bureaucratic machinery grinding against them, will eventually stop pushing. I thought about my father's last days, alone on that farm, watching strangers drive by and photograph his property, knowing something was wrong but not knowing who to call. Writing that note, "She's crooked, call Tom," and then dying before he could tell me everything he'd learned. Had they stressed him into that heart attack? Had they called him, threatened him, pressured him until his heart simply couldn't take any more? I'd probably never know for certain. But the timing was too convenient to be coincidence. Dorothy was watching me with concern. "Tom, you okay?" "No," I said honestly. "But I will be." I folded the papers she'd given me, slipped them into my jacket, and headed for the door. "Tom," she called after me, "be careful. These people have connections. The county commissioner's office, the sheriff's department, the courts. They've been doing this for years, and nobody's been able to stop them." "Nobody's tried hard enough," I said. "Your father tried. 3 weeks ago, right after that woman came to see him. He came in here asking the same questions you're asking. I showed him the same files." I stopped, turned around slowly. "What did he do?" Dorothy's eyes glistened. "He said he was going to fight them, said he'd rather die than let them take his land." She paused. And then, 5 days later, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I walked out into the Texas heat, my father's words echoing in my head. He'd rather die than let them take his land. And 5 days later, his heart had stopped. Coincidence? Maybe. Old men die of heart attacks all the time. But standing there in the parking lot, holding proof of forgery and fraud, I couldn't shake the feeling that Patricia Sinclair had been waiting, watching, counting down the days until my father was out of the way. And now she thought I'd be easy. She was wrong. I called every lawyer in the county that afternoon. 3 refused to take the case. Conflict of interest, they said, which meant they were already on Patricia's payroll. 2 more were too busy with existing clients. One actually laughed when I explained the situation. "Son," he said, "you're talking about Meadow Creek HOA. You know who sits on their board, the county commissioner's chief of staff. You know who handles their legal work. The same firm that represents half the businesses in town. You want to fight that machine? Good luck. You'll need it." I hung up and stared at the wall of my motel room. The box with my father's ashes sat on the nightstand. The paperwork Dorothy had given me was spread across the bed. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something I hadn't felt in 25 years of firefighting. Doubt, not fear. I'd burned that out of myself long ago, but doubt, the quiet voice that whispers maybe you're in over your head. Maybe this is one fire you can't fight. Maybe you should just take whatever they offer and walk away. I picked up the wooden box, ran my fingers over the carved lid. "What do I do, Dad?" I said out loud. "You spent your whole life on that land. You fought for it until the day you died, and now they're trying to take it and I don't know how to stop them." No answer. Of course not. The dead don't give advice. They just leave us to figure it out on our own. I set the box back down and was about to pour myself a drink when someone knocked on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Hadn't told anyone where I was staying. My hand moved automatically to the nightstand drawer, where I'd put the hunting knife I always carried in my truck. "Who is it?" "Tommy, it's Miguel. Open up." Miguel Rodriguez, 58 years old, chief of Station 12 in the next county over. We'd worked together for 20 years. He'd been at my father's funeral, driven all the way to Arizona to pay his respects. I opened the door. Miguel stood there in civilian clothes, jeans, a faded fire department t-shirt, boots that had seen better days. Behind him in the parking lot, I saw 3 pickup trucks. 5 more men stood beside them, all wearing the same type of shirt. Firefighters. My brothers. "Miguel, what are you doing here?" He pushed past me into the room, looked around at the papers on the bed, the box on the nightstand, the dark circles under my eyes. "We heard what happened," he said. "Whole departments talking, some HOA witch trying to steal your dad's farm." He shook his head. "Tommy, why didn't you call? This is my fight. I can't drag you into bullshit." Miguel cut me off with a single word. "You pulled my nephew out of that warehouse fire in 09. Carried him on your back through 200 feet of smoke and flame. You think I forgot that? You think any of us forgot?" He stepped closer, put his hand on my shoulder. 15 of us drove here tonight, Tommy. 15. We took vacation days, called in favors, told our wives that we'd be back when we're back. We're not leaving until this is done." I looked past him, through the open door, at the men standing in the parking lot. They recognized every face. Bobby Chen, who I'd trained as a rookie 15 years ago. Marcus Williams, who'd saved my life during a roof collapse in 2018. Frank Delgado, whose daughter I'd carried out of a burning apartment when she was 3 years old. 25 years of brotherhood. 25 years of walking into hell together and walking out again. And now they were here, hundreds of miles from home, because one of their own was in trouble. "Miguel," I said. My voice cracked. I cleared my throat. "I don't know what to say." "Say you've got a plan," he replied, "because we drove all this way, and I'd hate to think it was just for the scenery." I looked at the papers on the bed, the forged signature, the dead notary's stamp. The 11 families who'd lost everything. "I've got a plan," I said, "but it's going to take all of us." Miguel grinned. That familiar grin I'd seen before every dangerous call, every impossible rescue, every fire that everyone said couldn't be fought. "That's what we're here for, Captain. Just tell us where to point the hose." I looked at these men. My brothers, my family in every way that mattered. and felt something break loose inside my chest. For days, I'd been carrying this weight alone, the grief, the anger, the overwhelming sense that I was fighting an enemy I couldn't see and couldn't touch. But I wasn't alone. I'd never been alone. "Come inside," I said, my voice rough. "All of you. We've got work to do." They filed into the motel room, 15 men in a space built for two. Some sat on the beds, some leaned against the walls. Marcus pulled out a cooler full of beer he'd brought from home. Frank started making coffee with the ancient machine on the dresser. For a moment, it felt like being back at the station after a hard call. That particular kind of camaraderie that only exists between people who've seen the worst of human experience and kept going anyway. Miguel clapped his hands together. "All right, Captain. Give us the sitrep." I spread the documents across the bed and started talking. The forged signature, the dead notary, the shell companies, the pattern of stolen farms, the auction scheduled in 6 days. They listened without interrupting. These were men who knew how to process bad news quickly. Men who had learned, through years of emergencies, to skip the emotions and focus on the facts. When I finished, Bobby Chen let out a low whistle. "That's one hell of a mess." "It's worse than a mess," Marcus said. "It's organized, professional. These people have been doing this for years." "Which means they've gotten sloppy," Miguel added. "Confident. They didn't expect anyone to fight back. That's their weakness." "So how do we exploit it?" Frank asked. And just like that, we started planning. Not with despair, not with anger, but with the cold, methodical efficiency of men who had spent their careers solving impossible problems. We worked through the night. Bobby Chen, before he became a firefighter, had done IT work for a software company. Within 3 hours, he dug up everything publicly available on Crestwood Auction House. Financial filings, property records, corporate registrations. The pattern was obvious once you knew what to look for. Every farm the HOA declared abandoned ended up at Crestwood's auction block, and every auction was won by one of 3 shell companies, all traceable back to Patricia Sinclair. Marcus Williams knew a reporter at the local TV station. Jessica Chen, no relation to Bobby, was young, ambitious, and hungry for a story that would make her career. When Marcus explained what we had, she nearly drove off the road trying to get to the motel. "This is huge," she said, flipping through the documents we'd assembled. "This is exactly the kind of corruption story that wins awards." "How long have they been doing this?" "At least 3 years," I said. 11 families that we know of. Probably more. "And you can prove the signature on your father's annexation agreement was forged?" "I can, but I need an expert witness to make it official." Frank Delgado raised his hand. "My brother-in-law is a forensic document examiner. Works for the State Crime Lab in Austin. If I ask nicely, he might do us a favor." Within 48 hours, we had a sworn affidavit confirming that the signature on my father's annexation agreement did not match known samples of his handwriting. The notary stamp was confirmed to have been issued to Randall Pike, deceased 14 months prior to the document's alleged signing. But paperwork wasn't enough. Patricia Sinclair had lawyers, connections, influence. We needed something more. "We need to get on that property," I said during our strategy session on the 3rd night. "We need to prove that every safety violation they cited is fake, that the farm isn't abandoned or neglected. It's just empty because my father died, and I was at his funeral." Miguel leaned back in his chair. "Well, Captain, you're a fire department officer with 25 years of experience, and they declared that property a fire hazard." I looked at him. He grinned. "Under Section 4-12 of the State Fire Code," he continued, "any licensed fire official has the authority to conduct a safety inspection of any structure deemed a potential hazard. You don't need permission. You don't need a warrant." You just need probable cause, and Patricia Sinclair just handed it to you on a silver platter. The plan came together fast. We'd conduct an official fire safety inspection of the Brennan Farm property. Multiple jurisdictions would participate, Miguel's station and 2 others whose chiefs owed us favors. We'd document every claim the HOA had made about safety violations and prove, on camera, that they were all fabricated. And we'd do it with a TV crew following along. One problem, Bobby pointed out. The auction is in 6 days. Even if we prove fraud, we'll never get a court to halt it in time. We don't need a court, I said. We need to make enough noise that the auction house gets scared. Crestwood has been doing this for years because nobody fought back. Nobody shined a light on them. Well, we're about to shine a spotlight so bright they'll burn. The next morning, I filed an official request for an inter-agency fire safety inspection of the property at 1847 County Road 12, the Brennan Farm. I cited the HOA's own documentation, which listed electrical hazards, structural concerns, and potential fuel storage violations. Patricia Sinclair had given me the weapon. Now I was going to use it against her. The day before the inspection, I got a visitor at the motel. I was alone. The other guys had gone into town for supplies. When someone knocked on the door, I opened it expecting Miguel or maybe Jessica Chen with more questions. Instead, I found a man in an expensive suit standing in the hallway. 50 years old, silver hair, tan that came from a salon rather than actual sunlight. He looked like he'd never touched a piece of dirt in his entire life. Mr. Brennan. Gerald Marsh. I represent Crestwood Auction House. I know who you represent, I said. What do you want? He smiled. Smooth, practiced, completely hollow. May I come in? I think we can help each other. I didn't move from the doorway. Say what you came to say. The smile flickered, but held. Very well. I'll be direct. My clients are aware of your concerns. They're also aware that you've been making inquiries, talking to reporters, stirring up trouble. They'd like to resolve this matter quietly. Quietly. Yes. We're prepared to offer you a settlement. $200,000. In exchange, you drop all claims to the property, you stop talking to the press, and you go back to wherever you came from. Simple, clean, everyone wins. I stared at him. 200,000. It was a lot of money. More than my father's savings and life insurance combined. More than the farm was probably worth at auction. But that wasn't what they were buying. They were buying my silence, buying my father's legacy, buying 70 years of Brennan's sweat and blood and love. Get out, I said. Mr. Brennan, please, be reasonable. This is a generous. You people forged my father's signature. You used a dead man's notary stamp. You stole 11 families' land and made $4 million doing it. And you think I'm going to take 200,000 and walk away? Marsh's smile finally died. You have no idea what you're dealing with, Mr. Brennan. Patricia has connections. The county commissioner's office, the sheriff's department, judges who owe her favors. You think one fire captain from out of town is going to bring all that down? I think one fire captain who doesn't know how to quit is going to burn your whole operation to the ground. He leaned closer. I'm trying to help you. Take the money. Go home. Mourn your father like a normal person, because if you keep pushing, if you go through with this inspection stunt tomorrow, things are going to get very unpleasant for you. Is that a threat? It's advice from someone who's seen what happens to people who fight Patricia Sinclair. I stepped forward, close enough that he had to lean back, close enough that he could see I wasn't bluffing. Tell Patricia something from me, I said quietly. I've spent 25 years running into buildings everyone else was running away from. I've seen men burn alive. I've breathed smoke so thick it turned my lungs black. I've been buried under collapsed roofs and dug my way out with my bare hands. You think I'm scared of a woman with a clipboard and a couple of connections? Marsh swallowed. I'll be at that farm tomorrow morning, I continued, with 15 firefighters, a TV crew, and every piece of evidence I need to prove your whole operation is a fraud. And when I'm done, Patricia Sinclair is going to wish she'd never heard the name Brennan. I slammed the door in his face. For a long moment, I stood there, breathing hard, listening to his footsteps retreat down the hallway. Then I pulled out my phone and called Miguel. Change of plans. They know we're coming. We need to move faster. The morning of the inspection, I woke before dawn. I'd barely slept. Too wired, too focused, too aware of everything that could go wrong. But I didn't feel tired. I felt alive in a way I hadn't felt since the last time I'd walked into a burning building. My father's ashes were still on the nightstand. I picked up the box, held it close for a moment. Today's the day, Dad. Either I get our land back or I go down swinging. Either way, I'm not walking away. I got dressed in full uniform. Class A's, polished brass, captain's badge gleaming on my chest. If I was going to fight this battle, I was going to look the part. The other firefighters were already assembled in the motel parking lot when I walked outside. 15 men in matching uniforms, standing beside 4 fire trucks that they'd somehow gotten authorized for the trip. American flags flew from the antennas. Department logos gleamed in the early morning light. Miguel walked up and handed me a coffee. You ready, Captain? Ready as I'll ever be. TV crew's meeting us there. Jessica said she's bringing her best cameraman. Good. We mounted up and rolled out, a convoy of red and white cutting through the morning mist. The drive to the farm took about 20 minutes. 20 minutes to think about everything that had led to this moment. My grandfather buying land to escape his nightmares. My father working that land for 60 years. My mother's ashes scattered under the oak tree by the pond. And now, one final fight to keep it all. We turned onto County Road 12. The farm came into view. The house on the hill, the barn that Dad had rebuilt in '87, the fields stretching toward the horizon. The orange notice of abandonment sign was still on the gate. But so were Patricia Sinclair and her people. She was there with 3 vehicles. Her white Mercedes, the HOA pickup truck, and a sedan that I assumed belonged to her lawyer. The 2 guards from before stood by the gate, trying to look intimidating. And next to Patricia stood a man I recognized from his photo, Gerald Marsh, the Crestwood representative who'd tried to bribe me the day before. They'd known we were coming, probably from the moment I filed the inspection request, but they hadn't known we'd bring reinforcements. As our convoy pulled up, I saw Patricia's face change. The smug confidence she'd worn at our first meeting cracked and crumbled as she counted the trucks, the firefighters, the camera crew climbing out of the news van. "What is this?" she demanded as I stepped out of the lead vehicle. "This is harassment. This is private property." I walked toward her with deliberate calm. Behind me, 15 firefighters formed up in perfect rows, like soldiers preparing for battle. "Mrs. Sinclair," I said, my voice carrying in the morning air. "I'm Captain Thomas Brennan of the Cedar Valley Fire Department. I'm here to conduct an official safety inspection of this property." "You have no right." "Actually, I do." I held up the paperwork. Under Section 4-12 of State Fire Code, any licensed fire official may inspect any structure deemed a potential hazard. Your own documentation declares this farm a fire hazard. Multiple electrical violations, structural concerns, potential fuel storage issues. I let the words hang. "I'm here to verify those claims." Her eyes darted to the camera crew, to the firefighters, to Marsh standing uselessly beside her. "This is a setup. You're trying to intimidate." "I'm trying to determine if this property is actually dangerous," I cut in. "Because if it's not, if all those violations you cited were fabricated, then we have a very different situation here." I turned to my team. Let's move out. Full inspection. Document everything. The firefighters surged past her like a tide. She tried to block them, waving her arms, shouting something about unauthorized access and lawsuits and the county commissioner. Nobody listened. Nobody stopped. For the next 2 hours, we turned that farm inside out. Every violation the HOA had cited was photographed, tested, and documented. The electrical hazards. Wiring had been professionally updated in 2019. I found the contractor's receipt in my father's filing cabinet. The structural concerns in the barn. We brought in a licensed structural engineer who declared it sound. The potential fuel storage violations. A half-empty can of gasoline for the lawnmower, stored properly in a ventilated shed. None of it was real. All of it was lies. But the best moment came when we searched the farmhouse itself. I walked through my father's home for the first time since his death. Everything was exactly as he'd left it. Coffee cup still on the counter, newspaper from 3 weeks ago still on the kitchen table, the familiar smell of pipe tobacco and old books. On his desk, under a stack of unread mail, I found something that made my heart stop. An envelope, unsealed, addressed to me. Inside was a letter, handwritten in my father's familiar scrawl. Tommy, that woman came back today. Patricia something. She's not giving up. I told her no again, but she looked at me like I was already dead. I'm going to the county records office tomorrow. Going to find out what she's really after. Something's wrong here. These people don't just want my land. They want something specific about it. Maybe the water rights, maybe the mineral access. I don't know yet. If anything happens to me, don't let them win. This land has been Brennan land since your grandfather came home from Korea. It's yours now, or it will be. Don't let some suit with a clipboard take it away. I love you, son. I should have said it more. Come home soon. Dad. I stood there in his office, holding his last words to me, and cried for the first time since the funeral. Captain, someone's voice from behind me. Bobby Chen, looking concerned. You okay? I wiped my face, folded the letter carefully, put it in my pocket over my heart. I'm fine. Did you find anything else? Yeah, you need to see this. He led me to the kitchen table. There, spread out under the newspaper I'd pushed aside, was a stack of documents, the original annexation agreement that Patricia had sent my father, unsigned. And on top of it, in my father's handwriting, a note, told this woman no. She's crooked. Call Tom. He'd known. He'd tried to warn me, and before he could, his heart had given out, or been helped along. I looked up. Through the kitchen window, I could see Patricia Sinclair pacing by the gate, on her phone, gesturing wildly. Her perfect facade was crumbling. Bobby, get the camera crew in here. I want this documented. I walked outside holding the unsigned agreement in one hand and my father's note in the other. Jessica Chen and her cameraman were waiting. My father never signed anything, I announced, loud enough for everyone to hear, and he knew exactly what Patricia Sinclair was trying to do. He left this note 3 weeks ago. She's crooked. Call Tom. He tried to warn me. He tried to fight back. I turned to face Patricia directly. You visited him 3 weeks ago. You pressured him to sign. He refused. And 5 days later, he was dead. Her face went white. How dare you? I'm not making accusations, Miss Sinclair. I'm stating facts. My father was healthy. He'd seen a doctor 2 weeks before he died. Clean bill of health. And then, right after he started investigating your little scheme, his heart suddenly gave out. The murmurs started. Even her own guards looked uncomfortable. That's slander, she hissed. I'll sue you for everything you have. Go ahead. I'd love to hear you explain to a jury how 11 families all abandoned their farms right before your shell company bought them at auction. I'd love to hear you explain how you used a dead notary's stamp to forge my father's signature. I'd love to hear you explain why you filed an abandonment claim the day after his funeral, while his son was still holding his ashes. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, another car pulled into the driveway. A dark sedan with government plates. 2 men in suits stepped out. Patricia's face went from white to gray. "Miss Sinclair?" The first man held up a badge. "I'm Agent Cooper with the State Attorney General's office. We have some questions for you." Behind them, another car, then another, then a county sheriff's cruiser. Bobby Chen had been busy. His cousin worked at the AG's office. The documentation we'd assembled, the forged signatures, the dead notary, the shell companies, the auction records, had been enough to trigger an investigation. And the agents had been watching, waiting for the right moment to move. That moment was now. "Patricia Sinclair," Agent Cooper continued, "you're being detained for questioning in connection with fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit theft. You have the right to remain silent. This is outrageous." She spun toward Marsh, toward her lawyer, toward anyone who might help. "Do something." Marsh was already backing toward his car. The lawyer had his phone out, refusing to meet her eyes. The guards had vanished completely. And then Patricia made the worst decision of her life. She ran. I don't know what she was thinking. Maybe she thought she could get to her car. Maybe she thought she could disappear, regroup, hire better lawyers. Maybe she wasn't thinking at all. She sprinted toward the back of the property, heels sinking into the dirt, white suit flashing in the morning sun. The agents shouted. The cameraman swiveled to follow. Patricia was running blindly now, pure panic driving her. The heels that had looked so professional in the HOA office were death traps on farmland. She stumbled once, caught herself, kept going. I could have stopped her, could have called out, told her there was nowhere to go. But some part of me, the part that remembered my father's cold body and his unfinished letter and all those families she'd destroyed, wanted to watch her run. Some lessons are only learned the hard way. And Patricia Sinclair, president of Meadow Creek HOA, real estate thief, forger of documents, and would-be destroyer of my family's legacy, ran straight into the one thing my father had never gotten around cleaning up: the manure pile. It wasn't big, just a leftover heap from the cow he'd sold a month before he died. But it was wet, and it was deep, and when Patricia's designer heels hit it at full speed, she went down like she'd been tackled. The sound she made wasn't quite human. She tried to stand, slipped, went down again. Her white suit was now brown and green and things I'd rather not describe. The smell reached us from 50 feet away. One of the agents approached cautiously, handcuffs out. "Ma'am, if you're done." She was done. Covered in manure, mascara running down her face, expensive clothes ruined beyond recognition. The woman who had stolen 11 families' land, who had probably contributed to my father's death, who had smiled while she told me I couldn't come home. She was being handcuffed in a pile of cow dung while a news camera captured every moment. Miguel appeared at my shoulder. "That's karma, Tommy. That's pure karma." I watched them lead her away, watched them put Marsh in another car, along with the lawyer who'd been stupid enough to stick around. Watched the news crew capture everything. Then I walked back to the farmhouse, sat down on my father's porch and let the sun warm my face. It was over. Not the legal process. That would take months. But the fight. I'd won. And somewhere, I hoped, my father was finally at peace. The aftermath came in waves. Patricia Sinclair was charged with 14 counts of fraud, 11 counts of forgery, and 6 counts of conspiracy to commit theft. Her trial lasted 3 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming. The forged documents, the shell companies, the auction records, the testimony of families she'd victimized. Her lawyer tried to argue that she was merely overzealous in her HOA duties. The jury didn't buy it. 8 years. Federal prison. She'll be 70 before she's eligible for parole. Gerald Marsh got 6 years for his role in the scheme. Crestwood Auction House was shut down permanently, its license revoked, its assets seized. The lawyer who'd helped them draft fraudulent documents was disbarred and is currently facing his own criminal charges. In total, 17 people were arrested in connection with the Meadow Creek HOA fraud. The investigation revealed that they'd stolen not 11, but 23 farms over a 5-year period, netting nearly $8 million. 11 families received full restitution. Their land was returned, their records cleared, their names restored. 3 families had already lost elderly members during the stress of the proceedings. They received additional settlements from a victim compensation fund. The county commissioner's chief of staff, who had been feeding information to Patricia for years, resigned in disgrace. The sheriff's deputy, who had refused to help me on that first night, was quietly transferred to a desk job in another county. As for me, I received compensation for the emotional distress, legal fees, and damaged property. $127,000 total. I donated most of it to a legal defense fund for families facing similar HOA abuses. The farm, of course, remained in my name, just as it should have been all along. The day after the verdict, I drove out to the farm alone. No firefighters, no reporters, no lawyers, just me and the land, and the silence my grandfather had come here to find. I walked the property line like I'd seen my father do 1,000 times, checking fences, looking for damage, touching the wooden posts he'd driven into the ground decades ago. Some of them still bore his handwriting, measurements, dates, notes about repairs needed. At the back of the property, near the tree line, I found something I'd never noticed before. A small wooden cross, weathered and gray, almost hidden in the tall grass. I knelt down and brushed away the dirt. Duke, 1987 to 2001. Good dog. My father's hunting dog. I'd forgotten all about him. Duke had been ancient when I was a kid. A graying German shepherd who would follow Dad everywhere and sleep at the foot of his bed every night. I'd cried for a week when he died. Dad had buried him here, at the edge of the property he'd loved and never told me where. Never made a big deal about it. Just did it quietly, the way he did everything. I sat there for a long time, thinking about all the things my father never said. All the emotions he kept locked inside. All the love he showed through action rather than words. He wasn't a demonstrative man. Neither was his father or his father before him. Brennan men didn't talk about feelings. They fixed fences and baled hay and showed up when they were needed. But love doesn't require words. Sometimes it's buried in the soil, waiting to be discovered. 3 months after Patricia's conviction, I held a gathering at the farm. 15 firefighters and their families. Dorothy from the records office. Jessica Chen, who had won 2 journalism awards for her coverage of the case. A handful of neighbors who had been too scared to speak up before, but wanted to say, "Thank you now." Miguel handled the grill. Bobby's wife brought enough potato salad to feed an army. Kids ran through the fields chasing fireflies, while adults sat on the porch, drinking beer and telling stories. At sunset, I stood up and clinked my bottle to get everyone's attention. "I want to thank you all," I said. "When this started, I thought I was alone. One man against a machine I couldn't understand. But you showed up. Every single one of you. You drove hundreds of miles. You risked your jobs. You fought for someone else's land like it was your own." I looked at Miguel, who was pretending not to get emotional. "My dad used to say that this land doesn't belong to us. We belong to it. I think I finally understand what he meant. It's not about the dirt. It's not about the deed. It's about the people who stand on it together, the generations who came before and the ones who'll come after. We're just the current caretakers. I raised my bottle. To family. Not just blood. The family we choose. The brothers who walk through fire with us. To family, they echoed. We drank. The sun set. The stars came out, brighter than they ever shine in the city. Later, after most of the guests had gone home, I walked alone to the oak tree by the pond. My mother's ashes had been scattered here 40 years ago. Now it was time to do the same for my father. I opened the wooden box. The ashes were gray and fine, surprisingly light for everything they represented. "You're home now, Dad," I said. "Right next to Mom, just like you wanted. And I promise, nobody will ever try to take this place again." I scattered the ashes slowly, letting the evening breeze carry them across the water, over the grass, into the soil he'd worked his entire life, the land that had given him peace, the land that would remember him forever. I stood there until the box was empty, until the last trace of ash had settled into the earth. Then I walked back to the house, poured myself a drink, and sat on the porch my grandfather had built with his own hands. The same porch where my father had taught me to tie my shoes. The same porch where I'd said goodbye to him 3 weeks before he died. The same porch where I would sit every evening from now on, watching the sun go down over Brennan land. I retired from the fire department 6 months later, not because of the investigation or the stress or any kind of pressure. I'd served my 25 years, I'd earned my pension, and for the first time in my life I knew exactly where I wanted to be. The farm needed work. Years of deferred maintenance while Dad got older, and I was too busy to help as much as I should have. I threw myself into it, fixing fences, repainting the barn, replacing the old windows in the farmhouse. Honest work. Physical work. The kind of work that lets your mind wander while your hands stay busy. Sometimes Miguel would drive out on weekends to help. Sometimes Bobby or Marcus or one of the other guys would show up unannounced, tools in hand, ready to work. We'd spend the day hammering and sawing and sweating, then sit on the porch at sunset and drink beer and not talk about anything important. That's the thing about firefighter brotherhood. It doesn't end when you turn in your badge. One afternoon, about a year after the trial, I was walking the property line when I saw a car pull up to the gate. Old sedan, dusty from the road, Texas plates. A man got out, mid-60s, weathered face, hands that had seen hard work. "Mr. Brennan," he called. I walked over. "That's me. My name's Harold Tucker. I used to own a farm about 30 miles north of here. Lost it 3 years ago. They said it was abandoned. Sold it at auction for $40,000. He paused, and I saw his eyes were wet. "I got it back last month. Because of what you did. Because you didn't give up." I didn't know what to say. "I just wanted to shake your hand," he continued, "and tell you thank you. From me and my wife. From all of us." We shook hands. He got back in his car and drove away. I stood there for a long time looking out over the fields, the same fields my grandfather had first seen in 1952 when he was a broken young man looking for silence. The same fields my father had worked for 60 years until his heart finally gave out. And now they were mine. To protect, to preserve, to pass on. My father's words echoed in my head. The land is patient. The land remembers. He was right. It remembers everything. The generations who loved it, the people who tried to steal it, and the son who fought to keep it. I walked back to the house as the sun began to set. On the gate, the sign my grandfather had carved still stood proud. Brennan Farm, established 1952. And below it, a new addition I'd made myself, protected by family, defended by fire. Some people ask me if I'm angry about what happened. Angry at Patricia Sinclair, at Crestwood Auction House, at the system that let them operate for years without consequences. The answer is complicated. Yes, I was angry. For a long time I was furious. They tried to steal my family's land while I was burying my father. They forged documents, bribed officials, and ruined lives. They operated in the shadows, counting on grief and confusion and the slow grinding gears of bureaucracy to protect them, and they might have gotten away with it if I hadn't been a fire captain with 25 years of experience. If I hadn't had brothers willing to drop everything and drive hundreds of miles to help. If Dorothy hadn't been brave enough to share what she knew. If Jessica Chen hadn't seen a story worth telling. So many things had to go right for us to win. And I can't help thinking about all the people who didn't have those advantages, or the families who got steamrolled by the same machine, or the farmland that got stolen while everyone looked the other way. But anger doesn't build anything. It just burns. And I've spent my whole life fighting fires. I know better than most what happens when you let the burning get out of control. So I took that anger and turned it into something else. Something productive. I helped establish a legal defense fund for families facing HOA abuse across the state. I testified before the legislature about the loopholes that allowed Patricia's scheme to flourish. I spoke at community centers and church halls and VFW posts, telling my story, warning people about the signs. Protect your paperwork, I'd tell them. Know your rights. And if something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't wait. Don't assume someone else will handle it. Fight back. Not everyone can fight the way I did. Not everyone has 15 firefighters ready to ride to the rescue. But everyone can be aware. Everyone can ask questions. Everyone can refuse to sign documents they don't understand. That's the lesson Patricia Sinclair taught me, even if she didn't mean to. Predators survive by finding people who won't fight back. Take away that advantage, and they crumble. She's in federal prison now, probably still trying to figure out how a grieving son with a box of ashes managed to bring down her entire operation. I hope she thinks about it every day. I hope she remembers that moment in the manure pile every time she closes her eyes. But mostly, I don't think about her at all. I think about my father, about my mother, about my grandfather coming home from war and finding peace on this land. I think about the oak tree by the pond where their ashes mingle with the soil. I think about the porch where I sit every evening, watching the same sunset they watched, feeling the same breeze they felt. And I think about what my dad told me all those years ago when I was just a kid who didn't understand what it meant to belong somewhere. This land doesn't belong to us, Tommy. We belong to it. We're just the current caretakers. I'm the caretaker now, and I'm going to take care of it until the day I die. Then someone else will take over. Maybe a nephew, maybe a neighbor's kid who fell in love with the place. Maybe someone I haven't even met yet. It doesn't matter who. What matters is that the land will still be here, still patient, still remembering. Brennan Farm, established 1952, protected by family, defended by fire. Some lines aren't drawn on maps. They're drawn in blood, in memory, in the dirt your grandfather first touched when he was looking for a place where the nightmares couldn't find him. Those lines you defend with everything you have. I came home from my father's funeral to find strangers claiming my land was abandoned. They were wrong. A Brennan never abandons. A Brennan endures, and this Brennan is home to stay. Sometimes, late at night, I walk out to the porch and just listen. The cicadas singing in the trees, the wind rustling through the grass, the distant call of a coyote somewhere in the hills. The same sounds my grandfather heard when he first stood on this land in 1952, trying to outrun the ghosts of war. The same sounds my father heard every night of his life, lulling him to sleep in the house he was born in. The same sounds I'll hear for the rest of my days, however many that turns out to be. People in the city don't understand silence. They fill every moment with noise. Television, radio, phones, the constant hum of traffic and machinery. They've forgotten how to just be, how to exist in a moment without trying to capture it or share it or turn it into something else. But out here, silence is different. It's not emptiness. It's fullness. It's the land breathing. It's 70 years of history settling into the soil. It's my grandfather's hands and my father's sweat and my mother's laughter, all of it soaked into the earth like rain. This is what Patricia Sinclair never understood. This is what all the Patricia Sinclairs of the world will never understand. Land isn't just dirt. It's memory. It's legacy. It's the physical manifestation of everything your family ever was and ever will be. You can forge documents. You can bribe officials. You can manipulate auctions and create shell companies and build elaborate schemes to steal what doesn't belong to you. But you can't steal memory. You can't forge legacy. You can't auction off the sound of your grandfather's voice or the smell of your father's pipe tobacco or the way the sunset looks from the porch where you learned to tie your shoes. Those things belong to the land, and the land belongs to us. Not because of any piece of paper, not because of any legal document or court filing or official stamp. Because we earned it. Because we bled for it. Because we loved it when no one else would. Patricia Sinclair saw a piece of property. I see my entire history. That's why she lost. That's why she was always going to lose. And that's why, 50 years from now, when I'm long gone and someone else is sitting on this porch watching the same sunset, they'll know they're part of something bigger than themselves. Brennan Farm, established 1952, protected by family, defended by fire, forever.